We've had a year of loss of plans, of expectations, and many of us will have seen close up the devastating impact on loved ones on the premature loss of life. Perhaps with the year we've had and the stories we've heard around us, even now as we look to the crisis in India, we find ourselves in a better position than ever to get a glimpse of the context of Jesus' word in the reading we've just read. We find ourselves still in the farewell discourses in John's Gospel, following straight on from the passage on which Mark preached last week. It's Jesus' Last Supper with his disciples, who have no idea of the horror that awaits them over the next 24 hours. Jesus does, though. He knows of the loss to come, not just the loss of his own life, but the devastating loss of the hopes and dreams of his closest companions over the past years of his ministry. What does he do? Well, what would you do if you knew you only had one evening left with your closest circle before the world turned upside down? I wonder who we might have dashed to see and to hug before the dramatic events of the first lockdown unfolded, if we had known how long and how painful it was going to be. What is it that we would have said to those people in those last moments of being able to meet in person for at least a very long time, and for some, the remainder of their lives on earth? Something important. Something that matters. Not instructions about feeding the cat or putting the bins out. Something from the heart. And that is exactly what Jesus does. In these farewell discourses, he shares from his heart with those who are closest to him the words that he needs them to hang on to when the world falls apart around them the next day. It's dark. The meal has been eaten, the dramatic events of Judas leaving have unfolded, and the group are feeling a little shaken. In the upper room, disciples are sat close together, the room lit by candlelight, and Jesus shares the climax of his message, the one thing he needs them to recall. Jesus says, "I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends." Jesus' teaching is this: I am here because God wants to show you that there is nothing that God won't do in order to be able to call you friend. This is the whole reason for all that you're about to see, what I'm going to allow others to do to me. God wants to be with us always, and God is willing to go to any lengths to bring that about. We are invited to move from the idea that this is a God that we need to cower in the corner from, and hear this offer of friendship. In morning prayer on Friday, the reading was from 1 Peter, which contains the verse that gave me the most grief and upset in my teenage and young adult years as a Christian. It has the exhortation to wives, "Let your adornment be the inner self with the lasting beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit." A gentle and quiet spirit. Well, I still have neither of those. My spirit is a bit shouty, spontaneous. My spirit loves laughter and thumping tables with passion. That verse followed me around, told me how I should be, and promised me that I would never be beautiful. It feels almost ridiculous when I say it out loud now. But I wonder if that story rings true with you. If there is a verse or a bit of preaching or a bit of teaching that your brain has gripped hold of and said, that's it. That's why you're the exception. You will never be enough. I suspect most of us have got one of these on truths lodged in us somewhere, and no matter how well-meaning the source of it, it can sit there and do damage. Now, those words in 1 Peter can, of course, be put into context, explained. They do not, like many verses in the Bible, work if they are lifted out and used in isolation. If you're going to read 1 Peter 3, verse 4, you've got to read the whole of 1 Peter. Misquoting is not just bad journalism, it's bad theology. However, this is not a sermon on 1 Peter. What happens to my self-deprecation and to this untruth if I take seriously the notion that God is my friend? A friend who would do anything to keep being friends with me. That truth changed my life, and it's the reason I do what I do. God wants to be with us always, and God is willing to go to any lengths to bring that about. It's a notion that's easy to forget as we slip around on the ball bearings of life that a pandemic has given us, as we try to measure up to the lifestyles we're told we must aspire to in order to live our best lives, as we face hopelessness and loss. But in this same meal where Jesus spoke, Jesus gave us a visual aid that we can keep returning to when we forget that this is a God who will do anything to be in relationship with us. He took the bread and said, "Take, eat, this is my body given for you." In several languages, companion and friend share the same word, and the root of companion is bread. Friendship is quite literally breaking bread with one another, gathering at the table. Remembering Mark's reflection from last week, gathering as friends who mutually desire and need one another. This is what it has all been about since the beginning of time. This is the purpose of creation, friendship with God. In this place, we are invited to put down all our barriers and protestations of unworthiness and take the words of Jesus seriously. I do not call you servants any longer. I have called you friends. May this friendship transform our hearts, our hopes, our relationships, and our world. Amen.